So I had an epiphany about how it works and why I told you how it worked on a single source. So I started experiments with two containers and a piece of wire connecting them, which people have done, and I've seen it on YouTube. Some people have one, some people have two to make the streams, but it has to be connected up top. That has to be, and I explained earlier, or I may explain in the future now why. It has to be connected up top. But anyway, this run, I've got two separate containers. They're just cottage cheese containers. And a couple of wires coming out, red on the right, black on the left. They're touching. They're not soldered or anything. Red stream on the left, black stream on the right, through the inductors, down through, right to my electrodes. Have my regular inductor capacitors hooked up. Everything's the same, except I have made it into two individual source waters connected. And I'll let you see that run next. I want to show you with the two cottage cheese tubs with the connector up above touching, and it's running, and I do get a spark. That is one. There's another one. And another one. So it works just as before with the single water container, which everybody's seen this before. Two containers connected by a piece of metal, and you get a spark, and the Lord Kelvin's does work with two separate things as long as they're connected with some sort of conductor. And the streams are running, and my red stream's a little crooked because the way the ink pen nozzle puts out, but it's working. And it's a high humidity day. I've dehumidified the room enough to get some spark. So I wanted you to see this, that it does work in normal operating capacity. I just want to say that for all the different configurations you're about to see and everything, from everything I've done on this new setup, I've run every one of them several times, 8 to 10 times, and with each different setup configuration that you're going to see. And so it works every time. There's no discrepancy in it. In variable humidity, I get a little bit of variance in how it works, how well it works, the sparks, and the frays and such, but I wanted to let you know that I've run this several times in each configuration. So we'll move on. Okay, I want to show I don't even have any electrodes hooked up, just receivers and inductors. That's all that's hooked up in the water streams. If you notice, I'm getting sparks. I'll try a gap a little more. If you notice, it's jumping over 1/4 of an inch. I'm sure you can see it. I'm holding this so I can show you the whole thing operating. So you know I'm not cutting or editing or anything. But no electrodes. Those are just my plugs to put my meters on, wires across. And you can hear it sparking over 1/4 of an inch. It's almost sporadic. Might go fast and stop, get light and get heavy. And the only thing that's changing is the streams. And you'll say it's ions. And I'm telling you, it's just the acceleration, number of droplets departing from the streams, and how much stream is hitting the receiver on the opposite inductor. So anyway, I wanted to show that. That works wildly well, with no electrodes, just the streams, inductors, and receivers. Like I said, if I move it in, it just fires like a spark plug. Lessen the gap. And if you get too close, you almost lose spark. My water's getting down to where the streams are not hitting the droplets just right. The inductors, I mean. It's still sparking, just not as well. Anyway, wanted to show that. It works up here, even without electrodes. All right, we'll move on. I just want to make sure you know that the close-up shot you're going to see with sparks are the tubs here on top of the Thunderstorm, the two separate containment or units of water, containers of water, with the gap up here connecting those two. That's what these sparks you're going to see when you see these two colored wires. That's where the gap is, up on top of the water with the different setups. And want to make sure you realize that. If you can see them sparks or not, it's firing. Oh, go out and made a real chattery sound. And they fired real quick. But do you see that, how quickly it's firing? Look at that. I can't hear it this time, but before I could hear it. These are sparks coming from the connection of the water containers on top of the Lord Kelvin's Thunderstorm. It proves what I've been saying about the gravity of the water on the containers being the control, and that my theory is correct. It's accelerations and returning back to natural gravity or a balance. Once again, this is with no electrodes, just the two containers separated by the gap you're looking at, the two inductors and the two receivers. That's all that's connected here. You see you get over a 1/4 inch gap there. Right, lean it in, fire it up. Pull it back. When it builds a little capacitance within itself, it'll fire sporadically. Like I said, that depends on the droplets. Humidity is about 50% today, so I can't get the gap real wide. Maybe a high 50s, 56, 58. Major fray. It's trying to spark. And as soon as it sparks on top here, I also get the water streams almost go back to normal. But it doesn't release enough of the energy in this way. That's why it goes so fast. It tries to keep up, and it pretty well does. But it's gravity, people. Okay, what I want to show you here, it's running, no electrodes hooked, and I need to get everything set a little better. And we'll be getting some sparks up here. You can see them. I think you saw a couple there. There's one. The point on this is the fray never really stops. It just keeps fraying, even though this is sparking. I know you can see it and hear it. So the fray never stops, even though we've got spark. This is very, very important. And the red side's fraying too. But see how they go up and down? Big fray, a little smaller, just back and forth. And it's timed right with the pop of that spark. So this is very important. The frays never actually quit like they do when you use an electrode spark. You know how when you use the electrode, like I showed, the frays completely quit. But anyway, that's very important, and I'll show you why. Okay, to explain how the transfer works without electrodes, it's the same thing. You have to have the single source or your spark gap. And you saw without electrodes, I really get a lot of sparks going on, and I'm going to show you why. And also why is, like I said, when it comes down, one's capacitated higher than the other. There's more droplets being made on one side or the other. The theft of gravity to them droplets are different between this inductor and that one. The remaining stream going down and touching the receivers is also different. So the problem is that this receiver is capacitated by the amount of theft going on by this inductor, and this receiver is capacitated by the amount of theft going on by that inductor. And the remaining streams coming down are not right, because this stream, the amount stolen from this stream is capacitating that inductor, or that receiver, but this receiver is capacitated by a wrong amount. And the amount of leftover water conducted from the source, the mother, hitting this receiver does not match up to how much is being stolen there. So this receiver is not getting the amount of water that inductor is stealing to make it capacitated that much, and this receiver is not getting the amount of water that this inductor is stealing to capacitate it that much. They're out of balance. And it'll always go up one side or up the other side, and maybe always one side up or the other side down. But since we don't have electrodes here to shoot it across, hit the receiver and go up the stream and go around and straighten it out, this receiver has no choice but to either send it all the way up through the stream, across up here, and bring it down to balance. And it may even take it from here and back charge the inductor to do it. And that's why it goes, if you notice my sparks up here, it's going, but the streams never did snap back to a regular stream. The frays always stayed frayed out. They go down and out and down and out. And when you hook the electrodes up down here, they always snap back to a stream. Then start over, fray out, snap back to a stream. But without electrodes, it doesn't do that. Without electrodes, it tries to come across and balance out, but it can't. It can't keep up with the crisscrossed amount of stolen gravity capacitating one side or the other. It just can't keep up. That's why the streams always stay frayed. And remember, this gravity on this whole system works at the speed of light. Gravity is the speed of light. And that's what light is. It's like a Tesla coil. When a Tesla coil fires, it shoots an acceleration, a one-way acceleration out into the atmosphere. And the ionization is that the atoms involved in the acceleration can't handle that acceleration. They don't know what to do with it. There's too much there for their protons to absorb. So they have to move it on or disperse it as quickly as they can or anywhere they can. That's what light is. That's why you get a little spark here, because there's an air gap between there. And that's why you get a bigger spark down here, because you got more mass capacitating, and that air gap can't handle that, but it shows light. That's where you get light. The key is in the light, just like a Tesla coil. And my next videos will show you what ions actually are. It's just the location of the atoms along the trail or the conduction of acceleration. And we'll move on. Okay, it's running again. And I do have my electrodes down here hooked up. And I have a small gap up here. And when I get her set, just give me a moment here. And we'll start getting some fray in just a moment. And I'll get little sparks up here, but they won't be real as visible because I have this spark gap down here. If I widen this, these sparks get a little bigger. But anyway, my point was, here's a spark. There it went. Now watch the frays. There's fraying out and pop. And they go back. Now we've all seen this. I mean, that's how Lord Kelvin's normally works under normal operating conditions. My point is, this spark down here, there it went, causes those streams to go back to normal streams. You lose your fray. Here's this fray and here's a pop. I hope you saw that on the black stream. That's what I'm trying to focus on. The stream on the black inductor. Fray, pop. There it goes back. I can show you a spark. Bring it out, pop. And, I mean, the red side does it too. But the point I wanted to show you on this is, well, I will show you in a moment, but there's a difference between the spark up here with no electrodes as opposed to the little bitty sparks up here. You won't see near as many because the acceleration is being transferred to the more mass. There's more mass down here to accept that capacitance, and it balances out down here, which pulls the streams back down to streams without any fray. Anyway, I'm going to show you why, as I showed you earlier in the last video, with no electrodes, the spark and what the frays did, and now I've showed you with the electrodes, the spark down here and what the frays do. Now I'm going to show you why there's a difference in the two, between the two setups and the way the accelerated gravity conducts itself to balance the system back out. Maybe one more spark. I'll push it in and get one. Anyway, you saw it. So now we'll move on. Okay, all normal running thunderstorms, the normal capacitance of how it works, the more normal running, is it runs through, you cross your wires, your receivers, and you hook your electrodes up. In this situation, when this receiver is capacitated higher than what this stream should be, the conducted gravity still connected to the main stream is not right, as opposed to what this inductor is capacitating it with. It says there's not the right amount. There's more droplets being stolen on one side or the other, but this side thinks it's getting the opposite one that it should be, and vice versa. So when it wants to balance out, it shoots across here. The more capacitated receiver says this stream has not got enough water there to be making me this capacitated. It's not right. There may be less water going through this one, and this thinks it should have more, or it thinks it should have less. But when this is capacitated from the acceleration to a certain point, the acceleration goes across, energizes this receiver, and that charge goes up through the stream, across the top, back down to make the rest of this stream match up to what this receiver thinks it should have. That's when your spark happens. That's why the streams both go back to a stream. It's all of a sudden straighten out equalization. It happens right now. Then it builds up and happens again. Capacitance, release. Capacitance, discharge. Capacitance, discharge. That's why it works that way with the electrodes. They are more massful, so they let the mass of the receiver and this electrode build up, and it's building up because it's stealing from the opposite stream. And when the stream over here is not matching up to what it's getting, it gets capacitated, and it shoots across here, goes into the receiver, up the stream, back over to balance the system out. So this stream coming on down, touching the receiver, says, okay, we're back to zero. We're back to where we should be. And I wanted to mention this. It's very, very important. On my system here with no electrodes, and even with them, but especially without them, the only thing connecting the two streams is the source, this gap up here. I mean, when you have electrodes down here, you have that gap or connection there. But my point is, the receivers are not touching. They're insulated from each other. The wires are crossed, but the inductors are insulated from each other. And even up here, the two tubs are insulated from each other, except for that spark gap. My point is, the only thing that these two can conduct with each other to make a spark, the only conduction is the streams. The streams are the only thing that connect these two tubs to whatever's going on down here to make that spark happen. Just wanted to mention that. It's accelerated gravity, and it finds a way to balance back to zero, or the best it can to zero for the mass involved. Just wanted to mention that. Okay, in conclusion on this, you might say it's positive and negative ions, and whether you have, two containers connected by a conductor or a single container with two nozzles coming out of it, it's gravity, people. It's accelerating gravity, and the acceleration is gravity itself accelerating the water down through. And the reason you saw the spark, or there has to be one container, what have you, is as the streams come down, and we all know the inductors have to be right where the droplets or the streams break into droplets. As the droplets break away, they're no longer being held together by the conduction of gravity from the source, the mother. She's conducting gravity down the stream. But when the droplets break away, they're individuals. They no longer have the connection to the mother, to the main source of gravity. So the natural gravity of the air, the static charge, rushes in to capture and give those droplets their strong force, which is no longer being conducted from here. The inductors get in the way and steal it. They parasitically consume it. They capacitate beyond what they need also. That's just like making an electric current with magnets and copper wire. So this one is doing so much at a certain time, at a certain particular amount of time, and this one's doing a different amount at a particular amount of time. And you saw in my previous video when I monitored down here on the electrodes coming out from the receiver to the electrodes, the fluctuation in the direction of flow, positive, negative, it wasn't ions, it's which way the flow is going, how many droplets are being made. So anyway, whichever one of these is capacitating higher, inductor, whichever one has got more droplets and getting capacitated higher, is capacitating the opposite receiver with that same higher charge. If this one's got a higher charge of droplets, a bigger number of droplets, a higher amount of capacity, that receiver is going to have a higher amount of capacity in it from the electrical cross, and vice versa. If this one's more, that receiver will be more. The point is, when the stream gets down to the receiver, the amount of theft that this inductor stole from the droplets and the accelerated gravity coming in has accelerated or capacitated this receiver. But that stream coming down to this receiver is not the same as what this is capacitating this receiver. It's receiving the stream from this side at a different amount of theft, capacitance. And the problem is resolved when you have the electrodes hooked up. It's resolved at the electrodes on this side of the receivers. As you saw in my demonstration, what happens is the receiver that's getting capacitated more, let's say this side was capacitating more droplets, more acceleration and gravity, and more theft. Since this one was accelerated more or capacitated more, the balance goes up the stream through the inductor to the control, but we saw it change over at the spark gap. So too much capacitance here for the stream coming down says we'll take it up and move it over to the other side. And it's because the stream coming out of this one did not have enough to match what was here, getting stolen here. And it makes it like a belt, a cycle. It cycles around from the theft to the capacitance, theft and capacitance, whichever one's higher, it goes up the stream, across the wire, down to make this receiver balance out to what it should be getting. Since the stream is still conducting gravity down, but there's that much theft going on here, but it's capacitating the receiver on the opposite side. Hope you understand what I'm saying. And when it gets too far out of balance, the spark just lets that go back to the stream, up and across and down to recapacitate the receiver that needs what it thinks it should be getting, since it's on this side, but it's hooked to the capacitor or the inductor on that side. The spark at your electrodes down here on this side of the receivers is just your capacitance builds and shoots across. And it does shoot across here, but the reason it shoots across here is it's going from this receiver to that one, back up through the stream, across, or if you got one container, it's going through the water and back down to this receiver. It's balancing itself out. I proved that with the spark gap up here. It's all accelerated gravity, and that's what my theory is saying. It's not positive and negative ions per se, it's accelerated gravity. Thanks for watching.